Hello and good morning, good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to yet another session of this Inspiring Conversations program that I have. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is the last one in this series because then on 13th of August 13th, we start again. So I will take like one day off from the podcast. But as regularly as we do always, I will mention why I am doing this. So it's all about creating conversations that really matter. You're diving into ways to connect deeply, break down barriers, and build moments that inspire trust and growth. Whether it's with your team, at work, or in your everyday chats, we will bring more positivity, realness, and impact into every conversation. That said, we are live from my hometown, Kópavogur in Iceland. Kópavogur is the second largest town in Iceland. 40,000 people who live here. 40,000. So it's like it's like a suburb in the US. And I live near the sea. And I have to remind you to check out Hands-on Coaching, Inspiring Conversations on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, Facebook, and just use Dr. Google or Mr. Bing to find us. But today we have a great guest from the US. He has written a book. It's called More Than a Motto. Reignite your purpose, rediscover joy at work. And it gives me a great pleasure to invite Justin Robbins. Oh, I came up with that just like,
That's good.
You are similar, like beside the hair and the glasses and everything.
And all of it.
Justin, just welcome. Lovely to have you on the show. This is your book. We are going to talk about the book. But of course, the topic is when values become work, why culture is built by everyday decisions, not company slogans. But that we will do all in good time. Relax. Breathe in.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
And now we are in the yoga class. But who is Justin Robbins? And I can see that you're a founder of Metric Sherpa. But tell us a little bit about you and why is this topic like heartfelt for you? Because whenever I get in touch with people from the US, because your system is a little bit different than in Europe and stuff. How did you go from, I'm going to conquer the world, the American dream, and then land into this topic and this work?
That's a fair question, and I'm happy to share a little bit about it. We share the same sea. I was thinking about this when you were showing the incredible picture of where you're at. Also being in a coastal town, it's actually that yoga kind of moment that we had there. Yeah, that's incredible. I love this. I would happily wake up to that every single day.
Yeah, well, yes, and then on December 31st. Fireworks, standing near the church and just watching the craziness about that. But that is, yes,
It's
Okay, now
incredible.
you
I love
did
it.
it again. You did it again. You turned the conversation about me, but you are the guest, Justin. So let's
Yes,
start
you
with
did.
the beginning. You don't
Totally.
have to. You don't have to go way back from conception, but let's start with like when you were finished with high school and like what were your dreams and aspirations and stuff like because happiness is that something like you have for dinner or like how because
Who
it
doesn't want
is
happiness? Who doesn't want happiness?
well or the joy, yes,
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't
yeah,
have a book with joy in the title if I didn't think it was important for all of us. It's
exactly.
interesting you asked about, kind of getting out of school and what was the hope and the dream. Quite quite candidly, for a very long time, the hope and the dream was to be a music teacher. I've been a musician, so I guess I do have that in common with Justin Timberlake. So I've been a musician since early childhood. I was a percussionist from as soon as I could hold things in my hand, and also a singer. And was actually thinking I would go and I would become a teacher at a college or a university, and that was very much music and theater and stage. Those were all my worlds, certainly as I was going into college. And like many of us, I realized that maybe passion and profession weren't going to be in alignment the way that I had thought and hoped that they might be. And I had kind of found myself in this world of customer experience, from jobs I worked in high school, jobs I worked as I was stepping into college. And as I stepped away from my education to kind of decide what I did actually want it to be when I grew up, none of it was planned. None of it was kind of thoughtfully orchestrated, but it did start to take on a life of its own. And the short version is I was running service and experience teams for a number of different organizations. The last kind of operations role I had was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the sweetest place on earth. My office was at the intersection of Chocolate and Cocoa Avenue. I mean, can you get any more delicious than that? The job was what does it feel like to be a guest of the Hershey destination? How do we design and deliver that experience? While I was there, I started speaking at a lot of events and to my peers and others just about what our every day was like, the things we were navigating, where we were having success, where we were walking through struggles. It was always important for me as someone who had education and training as part of my DNA to deconstruct and help others learn from what I was observing and experiencing. And that operations role led to me running a large scale global training and consulting practice. And there it was, again, teaching organizations, doing research on customer and employee experience, and eventually then with technology companies and helping them tell their story and understand how to equip the people that they were building and resourcing with tools. And in the midst of all of that, didn't matter what role I was in, I started to observe this disconnect, sometimes in my own experience and often through others that I was just watching them go through their day to day. This disconnect between why people were starting jobs and the sense of purpose and excitement and joy and all of those things that we get when we step into something that we think is going to be meaningful and important to us. I watched that slowly erode. And a few years ago, I said that's actually the thing that I care about, that erosion between why people step into something and why they eventually lose interest and belief and confidence and all of these things that I think become the enemy of us being our best in whatever we show up to. So that's maybe the shortest version. And I know we're gonna dig into more of it, but I started as a customer experience operations guy. I loved training. I loved helping leaders and building my team. But then I really started to care about this disconnect between what businesses promise and what they actually practice.
So can I gather that you did not go to university, or are you just self-taught and just by observing and feeling? Because it's practically, isn't it? It is based on a feeling, like how would I want to be received in
Yeah.
when I walk into the door.
Yeah.
So you say in your, like, when you talk about yourself and you ask a question in the about section on LinkedIn, what happens when the most human moments in your business becomes your competitive edge? So you saw a value in using like joy or whatever, or like to connect with people and use it, or what, like what is it that you thought, like, am I close?
Mm. There were two things that I thought and still, I mean, very much believe in today. The first thing I thought is that we need a better understanding of what actually drives employee connection, and
Yeah,
this is something that I spent a lot of time studying, researching, experiencing firsthand, and I think when we better understand that, we can what we do changes significantly. So that was one of the things that I wanted to really root myself in. What actually drives uh, any of us as employees? What drives our connection or not to work? That's part one. I think the other bit there is over the course of my career, especially as I was leading training, coaching, employee development, those types of programs. I watched organization after organization after organization discount, underestimate, poorly quantify the impact of evolving some of these we'll say just human attributes inside of work. And we can think of them, some people like to classify them as interpersonal skills. I'm not a fan of the term soft skills, but right, there's all of these different things that show up that if we can't quickly and clearly quantify the value and the impact of it, we don't invest time in it, or we say, hey, you know what, we need to cut that from the plan. We've got to focus
yeah,
on these other more important things. And the reason I have that question in my LinkedIn bio, the reason why I put it in front of leaders is because I know that when we can actually quantify the impact of humanness inside of our workday, our employee experiences, our customer experiences, incredible advantage opens up for our organization. And so that to me, it's a reminder that even now, as technology becomes more evolved and more much a part of our everyday, humanness only matters more. And so being able to understand it and unlock it, I think is a
yeah,
critical part of any leader's journey, especially as we go into the future.
yeah. So I just I forgot to mention to you that we are a live platform, so people can ask questions as we go along. And one of my groupies is David Pushkin from the UK. He says, "Hi, Hidden and Justin, greetings from London, UK. Looking forward to this conversation. Another excellent convo with the mayor of happiness." But he continues, because sometimes David is on fire. So he says, acknowledged your point. Very great point, Justin. If you're going to work somewhere, you should be approaching it with purpose and joy. And as that was not enough, he has the third point. He says, having a heart-centered and human-centered culture wins every time. So thank you for that, David, and keep on bringing it, because that is the most fun part in
Yeah.
this conversation, because then it's more live, and then we get like between the ocean and UK and whatnot. But how? Okay, so when you approach, like when you have this question, because
Mm.
we are also dealing with, there is it the safety to continue on the track that Henry Ford started in 1900, or like that we are always going. It's so simple, isn't it, to talk about the humanness in business, or introduce it, but leaders, maybe they are like, yeah, but we don't know where it takes us, like what happens, and but then we have to spend money, and then we have to, like, the profit will maybe get lower, but research show that productivity and results, they go up when people are happy at work. So when you started to go on this mission and talking about what happens when like you use the humanness, when you went out there for first time, like what did they just like, or were they, interesting, yes? Like, how were you perceived when you went out and started to talk about making business more human,
Yeah.
if I can say it like that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The lens I'd say is typically not how do we make business more human, because I mean it inherently is human, and even to the point of some of the notes that David had put in, and you kind of reinforced this. We all recognize that these things matter and they're important, and honestly, in my experience, most people are not intentionally negligent or dismissive of the important role that humans play in our business. But what I will say is that we often have this misalignment between what we say matters and then what lives inside of our practices. And if I were to say the thing that kind of most effectively has cut through as I started to have this conversation with business leaders, I mean, frankly, anybody, is this simple question of can you name a place where you feel like work is working against you? And what's really interesting is that when I ask that question, most people would say yes. Not only do they say that, yes, I know that there's a place that work is working against me, but then when I ask them, well, you know it, why haven't you done something about it? This is now where we start to get that trade-off that we make between recognizing where humanness and purpose and joy at work matter, and the things that we then unintentionally, or sometimes maybe do intentionally prioritize over enabling our humans to be at their best at work. So that to me was where it really came down to, is recognizing that for most people in most organizations, some aspect of work is working against them. And until we recognize that, we can't have the rest of the conversation. But what's important to know is that when work is working against you, it does start to have that erosion of your sense of purpose, of your sense of joy, of that connection that you have to the organization or the mission that you started with, because you can't reconcile. None of us can reconcile. We say this matters, and yet I watch this play out every single day. And at a certain point, especially among high performers, you can only stretch it, right? I mean, imagine right now that you've got ropes on both arms and people are pulling
Uh,
hard in both directions. You can only sustain that for so long. And so that becomes the breaking point. That to me is this reset of, if we recognize what's breaking apart in our humans experience, then we can start to see where we can repair our business. So that to me is what it really means. It's not about making your business more human, but it is about reconciling this disparity that all of us as humans are experiencing between the promise and practice in our business.
uh, or maybe it was a bad wording. Like like it was not a good question. I didn't like play it, but you have answered. I think you have rectified my question and stuff.
Well,
But
right,
because
it is a question, especially with
yeah,
AI right now, right? Because
yeah,
and unfortunately, I'd say we're in a good swing of the pendulum where there's a lot less rhetoric around AI making wholesale, wholesale demolition to where and how people need to work. But yeah, it's something we certainly need to think about.
yeah. And David, he comes with kindness over KPIs. There is always going to be inherent value in being people-centered and having good values within an organization and implementing set organizational values through the ecosystem of your business. So our topic, like when we were discussing it, and I talked to my best friend Chetty, he's the best friend in my whole wide world, talk about AI. So we, after feeding Chetty with whatever you have, like what I had about you, so we came up with when values become work, and why culture is built by everyday decisions, not company slogans. So when did you, because this must have like this more than a motto, like it is like, yeah, we are the best in the world. But what does it mean? What does it mean to be the best in the world? And why is it? Why do you need me? And why am I emptying the dustbin when I could be doing this or that? Like
Mhm.
in modern business, we tend to, we are, we have the education or whatever, the references to do a specific job. And then in the end, that job is maybe 30% of our time. And then you are doing, what do you do? Well, a little bit of everything. I'm a custodian, I'm this and that. Like, so how did you, when you started thinking about writing a book, because
Mhm.
that is also a process, like you must have been contemplating and stuff. So when, more than a motto, like how did you come to that title? And when did you start thinking about the book? When did you start writing it? And because it's only from March this year, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's fresh from the press.
Yeah. When did I start thinking about this? Probably a decade ago. And
Oh,
it was interesting, as I was looking through kind of resources when I started writing the book in earnest. And I'd say I started writing the book in earnest about a year and a half ago. From yeah, about a year and a half ago from now. So about January of last year. And what was interesting as I started that exercise 18 months ago was I would go back through different articles that I had written or different pieces of research that I had done or presentations that I gave. And that's where I started to see this common denominator in a lot of those talks that were around workplace culture and why does what appears on the poster not show up in what we practice. You know what I mean? It was things like that that I would do.
yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
I would do a research on employee apathy, and whether you want to call it quiet quitting, psychological absence, there's all these terms that have been used over the last 50 years about people checking out at work. Again, I realized that I had this natural kind of draw to understanding that topic of why do people join, why do they stay, why do they leave. So that to me was the first part of it. I just recognized it was happening. It was happening even without me trying, and looking at it, it kind of became unignorable. Right. I realized, okay, this is clearly something I care about. I've been studying it intentionally, unintentionally. I've been writing about it intentionally, unintentionally. So that was kind of the point when I said, hey, I know I'm going to write a book. What's the common thread? Really clear that disconnect between promise and practice, to oversimplify. That was clear that was the common thread. But what to me then got kind of even more interesting is like, okay, how do I set out on a new kind of body of research? And this was, surveys that I had put out. It was interviews that I was conducting. It was conversations I was having over coffee with different leaders of organizations of all size. I kept seeing this pattern again and again and again, that we were saying one thing as organizations, but then work was teaching people something else.
Yeah.
So I as what, like, I love whiteboarding. My team, I think, makes fun of me sometimes because, like, I'll have a moment and they're like, you need to go to the whiteboard. It's like, I need to go to the whiteboard. And I started like playing with what does this really mean? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to this idea of motto first and foremost, as there's all different things that we could classify as motto. It could be a mission statement, a vision that we put out, values that we have, just this saying that we have with our team. There's lots of stuff that it's easy to say, it's harder to do, right? Even
Yeah.
again, I'll look at some of the comments from David, like, it's this stuff is easy for us to say, it matters, but deceptively hard for us to do. So that was the first part of more than a motto. was recognizing if we want our organizations to have substance with our people that we serve, our employees, our customers, our stakeholders, we have to be more than words. That's the first part there. And then as I started to write more and more and more and more, the last bit in terms of um kind of discovering like our sense of purpose and bringing back joy, it was really getting to this place of when people come, there is something very meaningful about why they step into something, and it especially like for undesired jobs, it's not necessarily because they want to do that particular job, but there's something that they're aspiring for, and this is still an opportunity to do that. And I think about some of the times that I would hire entry level jobs, and I loved finding out from people. I got my college degree. I want to be a teacher. I couldn't get that job teaching, but this is a place. I remember one woman, she's like, till I find a real job. I was like, okay, we'll work with this. But point is, like, we all have this passion and aspiration. And just because this job that we find ourselves in right now might not seem like the direct line to get there, doesn't mean that it's not going to be a meaningful opportunity for us to step into that. So that was trying to reconcile this thing of that as organizations, we put these big promises out into the world that we want to be known and understood and remembered by. And then we've got these people who have these very human, very personal, very significant to them things that they also want to accomplish. And the two are on this collision course that can either work for or against, each party involved. So long way of saying, like, that's how I eventually kind of got to where we're at on the title. And, again, just recognize that the thing that I care about more than anything I've ever done is being able to ensure that professionals, as they're stepping into whatever it is, the work that they're doing, have this clear sense of purpose, but that they can have genuine kind of joy in how they get to show up every day. I mean, I don't think that work should be life. I also don't think that our values should be work, but I do think our values should be reflex.
Yeah.
And that to me was the other part of this is we say these things are important, but do we know it when we see it? And is that where our instinct goes? And if we have to just react, do we act in alignment with our values and our purpose and the culture of our organization? Because that's what really matters. Otherwise, it's all left to chance. And that to me was the scariest thing is so many organizations that I was studying, their culture, their outcomes, the rhythm of how work works for them, it's not by intentional design. It's by kind of a coincidence or, just kind of reaction of how people were naturally taught and wired.
Yeah. You need to hook up with Glenn Bostock. He's a Canadian. He owns a company called Snapcap, and he wrote a book called A Human Business. And when he was starting, he was like, as he describes it, yes, all the employees, they should be happy for working for me. They should be happy for making money for me. But then he realized that this approach was not quite successful because and it was always, the old way, like if you made a mistake, then you could take your stuff and just leave and whatnot. And then he totally shifted. Whereas psychological safety was in order, everybody has to say, they started to have these morning meetings, like little bit lean, agile thingies. When people noticed mistakes, they got a little card where they could go and have a meal for two, or, they were rewarded for finding mistakes. And I was just like, this is brilliant. And it's just, you are valued. Like it is, you have something. And because I'm a social educator and I was working in youth clubs with the teenagers. And normally it was, do you get paid for playing with kids? When are you getting a real job? Whereas in my mind, the youth, the teenager, they were the most precious things that we had at that
Yeah.
moment. And they will inherit the stuff, the future and everything. So we
Mhm.
have to lift them up to like see the value in,
Yeah.
and hopefully not be as anybody else, because that is just lame as because when everybody goes use the same clothes, then use like
Mhm.
horrible, horrible. But in like I noticed that when I took the description or from Amazon
Yeah.
on your book, that work does not lose meaning because people stop caring. It loses meaning when the system teaches people to care less in order to survive. Are you talking about that you will just after a while, then you are a hamster in a wheel? Like it is just like you show up, you do your stuff, and then you go home.
Mm.
Like how is it that? Can you explain a little bit about this? What you're thinking about this?
Yeah. So I think there were a couple things that jumped out to me, and some of them actually, I don't know that they caught me by surprise, but they were certainly moments where I was like, "Oh, so this isn't just me." And I'll give you that as maybe the first example, and then talk to some of the other bits I discovered through that. One is I would say that I'm the type of person who's naturally wired to care a lot about the work that I do, the organization that I'm serving, the team that I'm a part of. And there was one particular job that I had, and I remember this moment of just this complete I was I mean torn apart on the inside because part of me knew that I cared deeply about the team that I was part of and the customers that we served. And then there was this other part of me that felt uh, a combination of probably resignation and frustration and anger, and I had a really hard time reconciling, like, how can I care so much but also feel like I need to stop caring? And in that moment, I mean, this was a long time ago now, and as I started to look at other people who were very high capacity, very high emotional intelligence, very high performing, there had been this slow erosion, kind of in the way that water wears down stone, where eventually they got to this place where they felt kind of unrecognizable in themselves and in their work. And it was this this one decision that was compromised over here. It was this one thing that a promise was made and then never fulfilled. It was this other place where they had to continuously step in and fill for a gap and never actually getting resolution on why it wasn't being solved, no matter how many times it was brought up to a leader, right? It's those things compounding over time that this this really became about it actually became the opposite of not people who stopped caring, but people who got to this point where they felt like they cared so much and the organization itself didn't, or it cared about things that were not in alignment with what brought them to the organization initially. And so it's that misalignment and that disconnect that then people get to this place of it's like, why bother? And so
Yeah.
maybe I'll continue to just show up, but I'm not going to give myself in the way that I gave myself before. I'm going to now actively look for what's next. That was this thing that was showing up and is showing up for so many people.
But how is it? Because when you are when in the process of writing the book, because I am at a certain age. I am 29 plus with 30 years experience, and you are. I find it unbelievable that you have over 20, no, 2 decades of experience, because you must be 15 plus. because you look so young. It's like because we are both like hairy and stuff, but like when you talk about this, because when you get you are at a certain age, then companies start to think, yeah, we can push them out, and they get the new one. So in a sense, like you start to feel like you're a slave, or no, what a better word, like is there a better word? Like it's a horrible word, but like you you get the feeling that you are useless,
Hmm.
and that is something that takes a toll because you have given the company all, and then with a stroke of a pen you are out. And you are talking about like where does the alignment go with the values of and your passion to go to work, and then you have the company who is just like, yeah. mm.
Hmm.
So what is it like when you meet people at different ages, or like did you look at that when you were, because this is really interesting,
Yeah.
because we have a different set of values: generation X, generation Z, generation Alpha. For the life of me, I don't understand the common sense in the generation C, although I'm all for it that the young people they take over and everything. But sometimes I just wonder where they, like, how and what did happened when
Hmm.
they were doing stuff. Like, what do you do? Did
Yeah.
you meet people who were just frustrated because they were getting older, or like,
Hmm.
I will shut up now because you are the guest.
So there's two things that I spent quite a bit of time studying. One is certainly among not just different age groups, but also different kind of social and economic backgrounds, and wanting to understand how does this play out based on where you live, what your upbringing was, what your education. Right there were a lot of factors that we looked at there, and probably nowhere near enough time for us to start to talk about some of the nuance there. But I will say that there's this interesting interplay between how organizations demonstrate what they care about and what they value to their employees, but also the inner monologue that every person brings with them that is largely shaped by all of their experiences to date. And I interviewed plenty of people who maybe today were in a fantastic organization, but had so much, for lack of a better word, baggage and damage from their previous experiences, that there was incredible distrust and guardedness and uncertainty and disbelief about some of the things that the organization put into place. So that certainly was a factor. One of the even more interesting factors that came out, and we're continuing to actively study this one, is just the general climate of uncertainty around layoffs. This started to come up in kind of a much bigger way in a lot of our interviews in as of recent, and just how that is messing with people. And there was actually an article I wrote a couple of months ago that talks about, like, why bother giving your best if a layoff is down the road. and,
Yeah.
and so I think there's, again, a lot that we could dig into there, but the reality is there's a certain responsibility as an organization in terms of what we actually demonstrate to our people. And this is, it doesn't matter at all what we say, people watch what actually happens. And so what does happen as we have employees who maybe reach retirement age, or what happens as we get pressure to make decisions and decide to let our tenured staff go and hire
Yeah.
in more junior people. The same conversation can be said about outsourcing and a million other decisions that come to this point of having to make a trade-off. And that's one of the things that I actually talk about in the book. I use this acronym of rhythm as this operating system, and the way that we can kind of intentionally rewire the way work works. And one of the bits is about holding the line. And that's these intentional pre-decisions about what we'll do when we're under pressure. And I think the example that you gave around uh, being unclear or uncertain about your future because of what you may be experienced or think you could experience, that plays a big part in it, especially as a leader in what we communicate with our team and how we kind of set expectation and explain when those decisions happen or not.
But how is it in your like decades of experience, or what? Because you are relatively young, and I have my thoughts about profit, and I think every time you hear on the news that this company has so and so much profit, and they are handing, like, throwing out money to the shareholders and stuff, when is enough enough? When, like, I know that there should be a profit, because nobody is doing this of the kindness of the heart to have a business, and you want to have profit. But always adding, like, yeah, next year we will add 10% to the profit, and you are always striving more and more and more and more, and that causes also strain on the employees and whatnot. So when have you ever given that a consideration? Like, when is enough enough?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm
Uh,
talking about?
I know what you're talking about. And have I give it consideration? I mean, we all have to give it consideration every single day, and we have to do it from a couple different lenses. First, here's what I'll say. I didn't write a book on corporate greed for a reason, because I'd probably have too many unhelpful things to say on that front. So you won't see that book from me. It's not coming out anytime ever.
When
What
you
I
have
will say,
retired.
what I will say is there's a few very important things. The first is that we all, as leaders, have a responsibility to understand and speak to and translate what we do in terms that resonate with the business of the business. And the business of the business absolutely has a factor that may have to do with uh, revenue or profit and cost. There's a factor that has to do with risk and reputation and security. Right? There's those big level things that we do need to have clear connection to. And the first thing I'll say that I spend a lot of time working with leaders on is often when you are unable to clearly evidence and articulate the impact between what you're doing and those business of the business metric things, then they may get cut for something that is easier to understand and act on. So that's maybe the first part of this, and it's a little bit of a tension on both sides. Could more executives uh have a kind of a stronger belief and understanding in terms of how some of these things play out? Sure, but they've also got things that they're being measured on and accountable for, and it is our job as the people who are maybe closer to the day-to-day and the reality on translating how does that tie to these bigger bits, right? So that's the first bit. As I think there is shared responsibility on being clear and confident in how we can connect what we're doing or thinking about or driving change toward, and the broader impacts that has on the organization. That's one way to combat it. It's not going to
Yeah.
be an outright solution, but that's part of it. The second thing I'd say is that it is very easy for all of us to make excuses about the things that we cannot control, that we maybe are frustrated by or fed up with, and then in doing so, lose complete sight of all of the things that we can influence and we can control, and recognizing the wins and the growth and the advantage that can have. And so, I think there's two sides of it. One is all of us being really effective in our understanding and articulation of how what we do connects to the business of the business. The more we can do that, and the more that people believe it and that we have evidence of it, the better, right? That helps us when we've got to make tough decisions, and every business has to make tough decisions. But again, in light of that, it also doesn't mean that the board had a meeting, targets are going up. This seems even more aggressive than we had last year. I mean, we could throw our hands up in defeat and say, there's nothing I can do. Or we can take a step back and say, what can I do? What is in my scope of control and authority and influence? I need to at least start there because there's no other place for me to go. Right. So that I think is the other part of it. Again, could talk about it a long time. And look, money makes people do really dumb things.
Yeah.
There's no changing that. That's hardwired into people. Um, so in light of that, what can we influence? What can we control?
Because yeah, I think that's true, because we have to look at it somehow and somewhat, because I am making profit for somebody else, and if the incentives are not there, then why am I doing this? Like, what is the purpose? What is the value in it for me? What like the Gen Zs, what's in it for me? Because whereas my generation just, yes, work is a virtue, and you were just, and then all of a sudden there came this word burnout,
Hmm.
because we just didn't see anything, and we just faded away. But because time flies, as I mentioned, time flies when you're having fun. You mentioned in the description of the book, each chapter gives you real world examples, research informed insights, and concrete practices you can apply immediately to simplify decisions, reduce hidden effort, protect energy, and improve customer and employee outcomes inside the work itself. So how is it, like, when you were studying for this book, like, because I mentioned burnout, is that something you came across when you were talking to customers? How do they value a company? I know, of course, customers, they really like, oh, I need this. Yes, it will be there in 5 minutes.
Hmm.
That is like how to take customer service maybe too far, but
Yeah.
that can be something. So what is it? Give us Give me something about each chapter, and what it is that you are implementing, so companies can do just in a heartbeat.
Yeah, so let's address how the book is structured, and I want to touch on that topic of burnout as well. So, how's the book structured? The first thing, it was really important for me not just to be pulling in my own research that I'd been doing, but also looking at what were other kind of bits of research and study that had been done on some adjacent topics here. I also had interviewed, a ton of organizations as I was doing some of this. And some of those were prior consulting clients. Some of them were just businesses that I had an experience with and I wanted to understand more about it. And so the first thing to know is that kind of throughout the first part of the book, everything that's shared is coming out, and I'm talking about in some cases the actual organizations and what they were doing and how they were thinking. Some of it's my own experience building and leading and working with teams, and what we were facing and what we were doing. Some of it's just kind of the pure data behind here's what we learned and here's what we were observing as we were looking at this. And then being able to say, hey, based off of what we saw through the data, based off of what we watched through the work, how do we start to deconstruct that and put it into kind of an actionable step for people? So how we did that then was in the back, the appendix is, and this is probably one of the biggest bits of feedback that I got from people of the book. I mean, they were like, the appendix alone became the thing that they have been referencing again and again. It's everything from what are the first 30 days that you might want to do with your team if you want to kind of diagnose the rhythm that you have in your workplace, to, hey, if you're really struggling with helping people understand belonging, dedicated exercises to dig into that. So again, I wrote this as an operator and a trainer, and if it didn't have genuine utility, I didn't want to put it out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I talk about the application. I mean, quite literally is exercises built with everything that you need to do to bring your team together and facilitate these types of conversations. So that was kind of a big part there. In terms of burnout came up quite frequently in conversations, things we were looking at. And probably the biggest thing I called out in the book and kind of continuing conversations is that one of the biggest factors that I was seeing in burnout wasn't that the work was hard, but that the work felt invisible or kind of at a tempo that is unsustainable. And so, two of the habits, when you break down rhythm, one of them really does talk about belonging and helping people actually see how that what they're doing is having impact and influence on the organization. So making the work seen. We talk a lot about tempoing the work and understanding that recovery isn't something that can just happen on the weekend. It has to happen inside of the workday. Otherwise, it doesn't happen at all. So these are certainly things that we explore in more depth, not just through the work, but honestly, we've had businesses bring us in for entire workshops that are just around how do they think about structuring it in a way that is proactively addressing some of the things that drive that feeling of work being invisible and unsustainable.
Have you ever considered 4-day work week?
I've worked 4-day work weeks in different organizations.
And how was it? How did it felt? Like, did you recuperate when you had when you had 3 days off?
So I think it depends on the nature of the job. One of the organizations that I had the absolute pleasure that when I left the office at the end of that day, uh, I could leave work there. Um, I've had other jobs that were a 4-day work week that that's really not the case, and the
Yeah,
learning
the work was just
boundary,
here.
it doesn't go
Yeah,
away. It doesn't go away.
no, yeah,
And that one thing I'll say is I've had a number of conversations, especially in the last, we'll say 3 to 6 months, and people keep mentioning that they feel like things are only getting busier and that more and
yeah.
more and more is encroaching into their uh, almost non-existent margin anyway. So I do have a concern that we've already been in this place of kind of an always on culture, and I'm concerned that that's compounding and accelerating in a way that maybe people aren't even recognizing yet, but yeah, it's again, this is probably a topic for another day, but I think
I think we could have like Justin Robbins 2.0, and we could have Justin Robbins 2.1, and like we
uh,
could be we can have a serious Justin.
here's what I'll say. This is a topic where the thing I love about this is that it's not going away. The thing I love about this is that it requires something every single day.
Yeah,
And we have to be consistent and persistent in it. So yeah, I could talk about this stuff all the time. And the reality is we should be. It has to be for any of us as leaders, like we need to be having these conversations and asking these questions and intentionally kind of building our answers to them right into what we do every day.
yeah. So, because we only have 5 minutes or 6 minutes left, I'm going to talk about 3 sentences, and you
Ooh.
can take like these are. I find them really interesting because we say people matter, then we measure something different. We encourage collaboration, then we reward individual competition. We ask people to innovate, then we make failure expensive. So this is a numbers game, isn't it? This is all about numbers because you have HR to do the research, you answer some questions, and then it is just, well, I thought, oh, like, why is it that we say, why is it our values are, yeah, I love people, people matter, and then we do something like,
Saying is easy, living is hard. We'll start there. Uh, Look, I think it all begins with a lack of clarity on what we actually mean when we put those words out. And when I say it's saying is easy, living is hard, what I really mean is being intentional about how those words come to life is hard. A lot of these organizations that put this stuff out into the world haven't taken a step back to say, well, what is it actually? What does that require of us to make this be true? And not just at a company level, but at every kind of layer in the organization. So how does that get complex? It gets complex because if you don't have an executive or executives who are aligned and understanding and setting that tempo and direction at the highest level in the business, it'll be very difficult for anybody in the organization. But you can have that guidance, and then you have kind of these. You've got to cascade it right through all of these leaders and through all of this depending on the size of your business. And if people aren't being encouraged and developed and engaged in a way that this becomes reflex, then it is just words. So that to me is the hardest part of it, is engineering this inside of the workday and not just letting it be something that we throw out there and then leave up to interpretation down kind of through our organizations.
That sounds to me that you're talking about lack of vision, because if you don't have the vision, then you don't have clarity. Like, where, if you just say, yeah, welcome aboard, we believe in people, and then the people, they don't know where to go because there is not the clarity of what am I doing here, or like in the simplest way. It's like idiotic to say it, but no, like, because we are almost at the end. You have your own company, and I will say it like a professional, www.metricsherpa.com. So how is it for you, and how do your employees, do you practice what you preach?
Gosh, that's probably a better question for my team, but we sure try really hard every single day to do that.
Let them answer it on my LinkedIn page. No, because how difficult is it for you to write a book? You have been there, done that, and you are thinking about it, and then you you make your own company, and you have to implement it. And then, well, I hope you get feedback from them. Like, I hope they dare to come up to you and say, Justin, you're an idiot.
They have no problem with that. They have no. So yeah, this I mean, it matters so much, and it's like what's the saying, that the cobbler's children has no shoes type of a thing. So we absolutely try to be really, really intentional, not just inside of our organization, but also question and challenge this every single day, because we don't, like, nobody gets this right all the time. And so as long as we recognize when we don't get it right, and that we take a step back and remember like what matters most, then it helps us get back on the path. But like, look, nobody's perfect. And for us, it's not about perfection, but I do think it is about intentionality in terms of what we say and then how we align that to what we do.
Yeah. So this has been a great conversation, and I love because you're 15 plus with 20 years of experience.
Yeah. I like that. I'm gonna use that from now on.
Yeah, well, I'm a trendsetter. So, but and it's just so much fun to realize that there are people out there who these things matter. That you have to have joy in your workplace. You have to have purpose. Like, you have to feel it and live by it, or like, and that is a pressure on you as the company's owner and stuff. And hopefully the psychological safety that people can come up to you and say, Justin, are we on track or off track? Can we discuss this? And for me, that is valuable. And that's why I love working with young people, because they like, try it, be audacious, because I have a motto. I always end my sessions with, be curious, be interested, be inspired, and be audacious, because there is no fun in everybody being exactly the same. It's just like bleh. So people can find you on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and X. They can get your book on Amazon, and it's on Audible as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? Or like, oh
Oh,
yes.
the audio version's coming out. We've been wrapping up recording, so it will be very soon. I've had lots of people asking for that audio version, and I wanted to record it myself, so I've been behind the game on getting that one done.
Ooh, this is Justin. You're listening to.
The smooth, silky sounds of a
Ooh, yes.
middle-aged, bald white man.
15 plus with 20 years of
15
experience.
plus.
Yeah, and we talked about that you have a website which is based on your name, justinmrobbins.com, but you said that it was
We have some
under.
exciting things coming there. You know, this is one of the things. So going back to one of my very first contact center jobs was at a company called Network Solutions, and they were the original domain registrar.
Yeah.
So back then, working there, I got a free domain name. So I was like, I'm setting up my name, and they didn't have Justin Robbins. Somebody else had that, so I had to use my middle initial. And so I've had this website for a long time, and we're finally we've been doing a lot of work there, and I'm excited. In early September, we'll be launching the new version of that. So exciting things to come.
Well, I decided to take the URL because I found it and it was working perfectly when I looked at it yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Oh, maybe it was some other site that we were. Oh, it's so difficult to be 29 plus. Before I will thank you, I just want to mention that we have next week we have a vacation. And next inspiring conversation is with Luca Oak, and that will be August 13th, and that is a Thursday. And not only it will be live streamed, it will be with live audience in Reykjavik. And I'm really looking forward to it, but I am also my stomach is a little bit like, yes, I don't want to go there. But we are going to talk about the freedom to let go, why forgiveness is really about you. Luca wrote a book about forgiveness, and I have listened to it, and boy, oh boy, like she had to go. I don't know how she could find forgiveness in loads of the stuff that he was talking about. But Justin, thank you for this great conversation, and I hope that you have enjoyed it as much as I. Let's give David Pushkin like the final thought. Great
Yeah, David.
conversation. Great conversation. Appreciate you both holding the space. The themes of purpose, joy, and living your values really resonated here for me. So thank you, David, for being he's really my groupie.
I like this. This is
But
good.
yes, yes.
You need to
But
send him
thank
whatever that. You have a very cool coffee mug that I saw you drinking from. You should probably, yeah, that's a great mug.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the Finnish Moomin characters.
I like that.
Oh, you Americans, you know nothing. It's from Finland. Like, you know
Good.
nothing. Well, thank you very much, Justin. And as I always end this, and I will end this now with be curious, be interested, be inspired, and be audacious, and buy Justin's book. Thank you.
Thank you.